Hi, I'm Neil Barker and welcome to my guide on complete strip and reassembly of the iPhone 4. Right, first we start off with our iPhone 4, nice little carbon sticker on the rear there, but apart from that, standard iPhone 4. First thing we come across, obviously, the little two screws in the bottom. Now the earlier models of the iPhone 4, they have the crosshead screwdrivers and screws in, and that's what we've got here. But the later iPhone 4 and now the iPhone 4S have the Torx, the sort of the five-star screws. So what we can do, I mean, ours is the Phillips, so we sell all the tools on our website. So we've got the sort of the standard Torx, just like the 1 or 2 use only ones, and we've got the professional Torx screwdrivers that you can use a lot if you're a repairer or you want to do it more often. Obviously these, we've got small Phillips screwdrivers as well, the crosshead type. So we remove these two bottom screws and they lift out like so. Dead easy to get into, but obviously, as you remember, you know, if you've got the Torx screws or the Phillips, then get the tool to suit. But we do emphasise that on our site. So right, once that's out, it's dead easy to do. You've got the rear casing, you've got the two screws out there. We're just going to put the thumb on the back. We're just going to push it towards the top. There we go. Comes up by about 3 or 4 mil at the top, goes that way, and then what we're looking to do then is just literally lift it this end, and it should come off like so. So there you go, there's the rear casing of the iPhone 4 off. There we go, it exposes the internals of the iPhone 4. Obviously it must insist that you turn the whole thing off first before you do anything else, and you run the sort of the standard anti-static requirements before you do it, because if you put your fingers in there and you've got static, you're going to damage it. So we'll put the parts to one side, but that's the rear casing off. So if you're replacing the rear casing, that's it, simple as that. You get the new rear casing, you slide it on, and then away you go. I like to use these little trays because the screws are so many different sizes that, you know, I put them in the compartments as we go, and it's so much easier. So there's the iPhone 4. Of course, you've got the battery there, the camera, and all the innards and there. So first we can start taking out all of the parts inside. We can remove the battery first. The battery connector here has a small crosshead Phillips screw there, so we can remove that. So that screw comes out like that. We're going to pop it in that compartment, and obviously the battery will come out now. So if the battery's never been out before, they're pretty tricky, and a lot of people make this error of actually tearing the battery connector off the board, we've noticed. So just really careful. You're looking to get a little non-marking tool, hook it under this little tab there. I don't know if you can see that, under the top edge there. Don't go too far in, you're just looking to just literally 1/2 mm in, and just flick the connector up and off like that. Any deeper, you're into the plastic connector on the board and you ping the connector off the board, it's going to need resoldering if you so it's a pain. So the connector comes up, and there you have this small bracket underneath, which is used to, I might have to leave that in there to remove the battery, but that's clamps between the battery connector and the board, and clamps the little aerial plug down there. It looks like it's coming off, so let's remove that. So we can remove that little device there. That puts pressure on that little connector, stops the aerial socket from pinging off. So that's the battery. It's quite tricky if you've never removed it off before. It's got a little tag here saying, you know, pull here, release the battery. Sometimes it's extremely hard, extremely well stuck down, but this has been off before, so we know that a quick pull of that'll come off. If all else fails, you get a little spudger tool, little plastic spudger. Again, you can get all these tools from our sites, and come in one side and just sort of pry it here up this side. Just be careful not to damage the battery, because if you split the battery, then it's no good. So you're looking to lift the battery, maybe a little bit of warmth as well, but you don't want to heat the battery or the phone up too much. So battery comes out like there. Obviously if you're replacing the battery, that's great. All you need to do then is slave the new battery in. There's little bits of sticky pads here that it'll stick down on. What I'd recommend is getting that bracket in first, push the connector on top, and then sit the battery in, and then obviously put that screw in. So that's the battery out. That leaves you the board. Now if you're doing this full strip down, you might as well remove this because it just gets in the way on everything you're trying to do. That simply pulls off, leaves a bit of adhesive behind, so you can just push it back down. That's that out of the way. Now we're into sort of more screws. So again, all crosshead type screws. Next thing we're going to do is remove the dot connector, or at least partially these two screws here. One very small, shallow, with a shallow sort of bevel head on, another one a little bit larger, and then this little bracket lifts off. that bracket clamps down the sort of dock connector cable, stop that from picking up. And what we can do then, we can lift that up. Again, get in the corner, just lightly touch it in there. Go too far and you're into knocking sort of pins off and chips off, and that should lift up, and then that's stuck down with a little bit of adhesive, sort of a bonding adhesive. It's a case of just literally gently running down the underside of the cable with a little plastic tool, just gently peels the adhesive off, and the cable should then literally just lift up at 90 degrees to the board, like so. Now once that's there, we can start thinking about taking the screws out for the speaker. This is the speaker assembly. Attached to it on the underside is the antenna cable. So we're going to take out these screws, put that in the corresponding little tray there, and there's one under here as well that clamps the board and the speaker down. We can pop that one off, and then we're going to remove this little aerial connector. Again, corner of the little plastic tool, not too much sort of pressure under it, but it's a case of just literally getting under there. It's quite hard to do with the camera in your way, and it's a case of lifting that little connector up. If I lift it up, you might be able to see that a bit better, and I can get to it a bit easier. It's a case of lifting that connector up. There we go. And again, it exposes that little circular connector, both very sort of sensitive. You don't want to end up peening that over, as you'll never get it back on. So that's this assembly sort of pretty much disconnected. We can't take it out until the board's loose, so we'll carry on taking the board out. Next little thing is there's a screw on the board here, covered by a little sort of white dot, which is the water detector. So we can lift the little white dot out of the way, put it back, just sort of dab it down there. It's a bit sticky, and then we can remove that crosshead screw there. That screw comes out, we put it over there to keep it separate. And the next thing we're into is this black bracket at the top of the phone here, and there's a sort of myriad of screws here, all different sizes, to remove that. Now, some people say that's a retaining bracket, some people say that's the actual Wi-Fi antenna, and I'm inclined to agree with the fact that it's part of the Wi-Fi antenna if you look at the sort of gubbins underneath it. So we're going to pop these screws out. There's one there, there's a really long screw at the top here, so we're going to undo that. Again, these trays are brilliant, just keeping them separate. That long screw comes out with a little pair of tweezers, drops into there. Really small, really shallow screws. This one here, that comes out just to one side. You've got a screw that goes through the board there in that corner, so that comes out. That can go in that little pocket there. And then a very, very shallow screw here. Obviously, sometimes this, that's a habit, it's only through a tiny spigot glued to the board, and even undoing it you know, sort of breaks the little spigot. Sometimes it's unavoidable. There's not a lot you can do about that. Really small screw there. We can drop that in there. So this bracket is ready to be removed. It hooks, there's a couple of little hooks that hook into the bracketry on the main frame there, so we can just get little tweezers, come down the hook, and you're looking to pull it down and up, and it just comes off nicely. So pull it down and up, and there's your little black bracket, Wi-Fi aerial, whatever you want to call it. It's got little clips and sort of contacts on, so that's that, and that exposes all the connectors for the screen, the headphone jack, the cable for the camera, and also the cable for the buttons and everything. So that has got that off. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come along and we're going to remove the little vibration module. So if you're replacing the vibration module, you don't even need, you don't even need to take the bracket or the battery out. You're just looking to, you can do this with it all in, which is quite handy. Two very different size screws again. You can't get them mixed up. One very long and one very short one. They both lift out, and then with a little pair of tweezers you remove the little vibration module and then throw it across the table there. The little vibration module comes out. One thing to note is if you ever disassemble and reassemble, we've noticed that there's a little bit of clear sticky tape on the inside of this headphone jack. If that comes away, that's enough to stop the little vibrating head from moving. So if you get a vibration issue, it's always worth checking that little plastic first. And it's non-essential, so you can snip that off and it will allow it to freely. Also, if you don't centralise that properly, and it can go in at a different angle, centralise it, then sometimes the little vibration head can hit against the plastic and it won't rotate. So there we go, that's the vibration module. Next thing we're going to do, and obviously a lot of people forget about this when they try and remove the board, is the SIM card tray. We're going to remove that now. Obviously if you don't remove this, then the board will go nowhere and you could end up breaking the board if you decide to try and force it out thinking you've got all the screws. So here we go, obviously we've got all the screws out as we go around. Now it's time to release all all the connections, and there's one sort of turret screw left there. Again, be very careful when releasing these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 connectors. And we'll also do the camera, which is 6. Corner of a little plastic tool, be very gentle, just try to get the top edge, the minutest edge you can to these, and it's just a case of flicking them off, being nice and gentle, not hooking any chips as you go or anything like that, and they come off. You don't have to force them. If you're forcing them, then there's something wrong. Have a rethink, walk away, come back if you're losing patience. So those, and then you come into this one, that connector there, this is the digitizer. You're going to look into it just a little bit underneath it. Again, mind the chips underneath. Maybe put your thumb on the board, stop the board from moving, and pinging that one off, and then the LCD screen comes off there as well. Just lift those out of the way so you can remove the board. And then finally, you can take the board out with the camera, but you might as well remove it while it's there, and it's a case of getting the whole flat of the tool underneath this connector, and again being very gentle and just literally nudging it, and the connector pings. There we go, and that's the camera. And again, if you're doing the camera change, there we go. In fact, little trick, if you're doing the camera change, you don't even need to remove those two. I know you've got this little leg here that goes under, but you can slide that under and then push it in, and the same on the way out. So little trick, try removing that without taking all that off. So that's the camera removed. So there's the camera replacement if you need be. Now we've got all those connectors off. We've got that little turret screw to remain. That's a little flat blade screw type, if you can see that. So we're going to just get in the head of the turret, spin it out, and then it should come out just like that. Now what we're left with is pretty much everything out. We've got the SIM tray out, we've got the board out, and it's all ready to go. Now as we lift the board at the bottom, it sort of comes up that way and then out. So if I can show you that, lift the board up a little bit, minding this cable, minding the little aerial cable as well. Lift the board up at the bottom, use your finger there, sort of your index finger, just to pull these connectors back, make sure you don't catch anything, and the board comes away like so. Little thing on the board, just thing to note is there's a little rubber, a little rubber spacer with a slot on it there. Sometimes they can sort of ping off and disappear, but what happens is it goes in that corner. It just protects the radius from the LCD cable. But it's not stuck down. It just sits there, and it has a little flat, and the flat goes on the inside because it's not, it's thicker one side underneath than it is the other. And that's the board out. So obviously to replace the logic board, there you have it. We can put that to one side now. Now the speaker assembly is all loose. Obviously it slots under the board slots over it, so it can't remove until you've got the board out. Then the speaker assembly with the aerial just comes out. And there we go, and there's the little sort of the antenna part of it as well. This whole back is an antenna sticker. So there you go, that's the antenna out. Move that to one side. And you're left with the chassis with a few cables in. Right, now if you're removing the dot connector, then we have a couple of more screws to do. Obviously, you've got a dot connector, the cable comes down here. It's all a one-piece cable, and you've got two little screws at the bottom here to remove, a bit like the 3GS and the 3G really. Two screws at the bottom, they come out, and what you're looking to do is obviously the home button comes through the chassis and connects there. So we're looking to release one of the standard sort of Apple clips with a bezel, where you flick the bezel up there, and it releases the cable, and then you're just looking at a little bit of pair of tweezers just to pull the home button cable out. It gets quite tricky. There you go, and then that's free. Now the cable itself is held down by adhesive, so it's a case of lifting it gently from this corner, and it should lift out, and all you've got is the little microphone, the little voice microphone here. Is that little rubber sleeve there. You can push that out. It's like a little spigot that fits into, and that whole cable is just adhesive down, and that will come out. Again, a bit of warmth won't hurt. There you go, off it comes. Just make sure you're free of the home cable without tearing it. And then there's the little tab at the end here where the home button is. Sorry, not the home button. On this end where the microphone goes into, that's stuck down a little bit as well, so it's quite fiddly, but it does come out. There we go, and there's your dot connector cable, free, and on there obviously the issues you're going to cure is possibly sort of bent pins, a little voice microphone problem if you got it. Sometimes the home button doesn't go in there correctly and that stops working. So you got the microphone dock. Oh, and there was a little speaker contacts there as well. So that's the little cable out for that. Next thing we're going to look at is the dock connector. We're going to put the dock connector in. Again, as I'm saying, sort of on all the new cables you get, they tend to have the clear plastic covering of all the sort of sensitive areas with the glue and everything. So just make sure all those clear plastic bits are taken off, so that it all sticks down in situ. Obviously, we've used this cable before. A lot of the positions of the cable, they've hints to us where they bend, dotted lines, or sort of fold here. Be gentle with them, but they're quite robust cables. It's a case of we're going to set the dock connector in there. It finds its own way with the radius of the cables, and how it all sits. It just kind of finds its own way home. And all the only thing we need to do is locate those two holes for the two screw threads. So hopefully we've got the two screws down here. There we go, 2 DD screws. And they go either side of the dock connector, so we can put in one at a time in there. Again, put it in loosely, and yeah. So it's just scan the new parts that you got, just for sort of clear layers of plastic. I know some people write in and say that on some of the guides where you're replacing things like the rear of the iPhone 4, you're not saying that there's a clear protector on the back as well as the front. Well, sorry about that, guys, but obviously just be aware. Sometimes you can't even see the clear protectors on screens and on glass and on lenses. Is so well put on, it doesn't even look like there is one on there. But it's always worth not getting anything metal to it, but getting a little plastic tool and digging at it. And if you can mark it, it's not glass, it's going to be a plastic cover. So if that's the case, then just pull it off, and you'll probably find that it's a clear protective layer. So there's the dock connector in, and that cable's sat there ready for the board to go in. Yeah, all we've done is put the two screws in and the little microphone. Next thing we're going to do is put the home button in. Now what happens is that comes through the front, so if you're ever doing a home button repair, you need to remove the screen. But it's no big deal. I mean, if you follow this guide, you can do it and replace the screen without sort of damage. So it goes through the slot like that, turns around, home button just sits there, and then you've got the cable come through roughly in the position where it's got to be. This gets quite tricky. It's a case of you having to pull up the connector and push it in. Now always make sure, before I do that, make sure that there's that little catch is flicked up and loose on that home button connector, just to make sure that it accepts it. Otherwise you'll be pushing it. You'll just damage the connector or the cable. So make sure that's up. And I mean, it's difficult enough as it is. There you go. It finds its own sort of only way it'll go in, all the way up to as far as it's going to go, and then just push that clip down. I'm using the end of the tweezers to push that down. I'm being extremely gentle. You could use your thumb just to feel your way down. Just don't force these little clips. Don't push them all the way that way. Try and push it down, because otherwise if you push it that way you'll break the bar off, and yeah, world of pain. So that's the home button in place. There we go. Make sure it's nice and makes a nice clicking sound, which it does, and it's all in position there. Right, next thing we're going to do is we are going to fit the loudspeaker with the aerial assembly. So you've got the aerial sticker here with the cable coming off, and these little tabs, and that's the loudspeaker itself. Now this slots into here. Nice and simple, straight down. The only thing to watch out for is, as you do this, get the old Isesimo, and you're looking for these 4 little spring tabs. You're pushing them in so you can push the speaker down. If you push them now, those tabs will bend up and they'll snap off, and they create the aerial connection between that and the chassis itself. So it's a case of pushing it down one by one, just trying to push them in. There we go. Clip them in, and then you'll feel that the loudspeaker will push all the way in. Then a nice firm home. Keep your thumb on it so that it doesn't spring out, and these clips don't spring out. And then we're just going to put the side screw in. So that screw there just goes in that side, and it just kind of holds it down, stops it from going anywhere. That's the only screw you can put in now until the board goes in, but that holds it in place, holds those clips in place. Nice little tip is just to keep that cable back, because as you put the board in, if it's around here, it's going to be sucked under. Right. Next thing we're going to look at is the screen. Now, this adhesive is still good. I mean, it hasn't got any sort of glass debris on. So we're going to reuse that debris. Reuse that debris. We're going to reuse that adhesive. But otherwise, you can peel that adhesive off, and we get the new pre-cut adhesive that we get from our website, and it's simple enough. It's all shaped properly. There's only one way it can go. Stick it on, peel it off. Now, what I'd recommend is heating this up with a little bit of a hot air gun, hair dryer, a little small oven at a low temperature, just to warm the adhesive to accept the screen. So this is you know, ready to accept the screen now. So we're looking at, make sure it's all, there's no dust on the back of the phone, and it's all good to accept. I'm reusing the screen, which you can do. Obviously, if your screen's broken, you're looking to use another one. Just make sure that the camera lenses are clean, the camera's clean, free from dust, and the home button is in situ. Obviously, this follows on from my top tip about these spacers, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we're going to do the screen. The screen can't just slot straight in. It's got to hook around that connector through that gap. It goes in, and then you're looking to hook the screen around, so you're in that position there. Now, there's a big tip on this one, and that is, as you get it all in situ and all ready to go in, don't just squish them together and hope for the best, because see that cable there, if I can point that cable out there, that, the little dog leg, will get stuck between the screen and the chassis, and you'll pinch it. If you pinch it too much, it will tear the cable, it will break all the contacts, and your screen's US. So make sure, gently pull the two cables through, and you're looking to pull the whole cable through all the time, looking to make sure it all comes through this side, and there's nothing left in that gap there. So you pull the cable through, and you've got to have a million eyes in a million different places. Obviously, top tip here, and if you're struggling, undo them. But obviously, I didn't undo these 6 washers and screw sets because it slows things down. But if you feel uncomfortable doing this, because this is the difficult bit, you're looking to slide the screen together, and you've got to keep your eye on all these washers to make sure that all of the clips for the screen come up, and the washer is on this face and doesn't get stuck behind it. So all the time you're looking to make sure that all the washers are inboard to the phone. If need be, just undo them a little bit more to give you a bit more space. And if you really can't get on with it, I mean, the sesame comes in handy because of the thin edge. It's just a case of backing off the screen a little bit with your finger, letting it drop away, pulling the washer, and then pushing it back up again. I don't know if you can see that, but you're just looking to have the tabs, that phone side of the washer. So there's screw, washer, clip, phone on all of them. So you do one side, you come around the other, literally just letting it rest on your finger, and we're going to do the other side. Obviously this side it's not gone down so well, so you can keep this side in while lifting this away. And it's a case of just leaving the washers out a little bit, making sure they're inboard. And there we go. All the clips are in there. Last thing to worry about is, obviously, we know that this cable's through. Quick last paranoia check to make sure all that cable's through, nothing's caught back. And then the home button to make sure that's in position. There we go. And it's a case of pushing the screen down. You can check all the way around there to make sure there's no gaps, and there shouldn't be any gaps. If that's the case, keep your finger down on everything, push down on all the corners, and as you do it, just nip these little screws. And imagine, you're trying to get the washers in. Doing this is so difficult. There we go. Putting quite a bit of pressure down on the screen just so it nips all those up, and then the same down this side. There we go, and that's the 6 screws. I've actually bit of a shortfall there. I put this loudspeaker in far too early because I need to take it out, because obviously I need to get to these 2 corners for the screws for the screen. So there we go. Right, so last thing to do is check all the way around, make sure there's no gaps, screen's okay, home button clicks, no dust behind the camera. Great. Next thing we can do is just put those 4 corner screws in. And there they are down there. So that's the screen replacement. And obviously, if you're just doing the screen, then you can leave everything else in situ. You don't need to remove the dock connector. You don't need to remove the headphone jack and cable assemblies, nor the earpiece, nor anything like that. Yeah, it's just a case of removing the board, the loudspeaker, the battery, of course, and yeah, and that will come off. you know, when you're heating the screen, we tend to just put the whole thing in our small sort of temperature controlled electronics oven around about 60 degrees for half an hour, just enough to let it heat soak properly, and then the screen comes away no problem. If you haven't got sort of temperature controlled oven, just use a hairdryer. You know, you don't have to be ridiculous about the heat levels, just keep it on there and be patient. The longer you keep it on there for at a moderate heat, the more it will soak through the glass and the metal and free up the adhesive. The temptation is to blast it with as much heat as you can, and it will just end up melting stuff, and it won't soak through, and it will go cold before it gets to the adhesive, and you don't get anything then. You might as well not bother. You know, all tools, all the adhesive sets, all the parts, everything can be found on our website, so you've got no problems there. So there's the 4 so-called corner screws in. Now we can, of course, refit the speaker. Same as before. We're going to just little push down these contacts one at a time until it goes all the way home. Put that little screw in again. So even the pros make the odd mistake. There we go, that's that screw in. So we have the screen on, it's fully secured down, we've got all the button cables back together, we've got the loudspeaker assembly, and we're ready for the board. So we make sure that cable's out of the way for the board, everything's pushed down there, and in comes the main board. Again, the thing I said earlier was make sure that little rubber space is in place. Pushed up against that corner with the flat on the inside. First thing we're going to come in from the top down there, but it's quite tricky, it's quite fiddly, so we're going to pull these cables out of the way there, push those LCD cables out of the way, and we're going to come in this end from the board into here. There's like a little cutout that it sits in. Not only that, but this edge here is a cutout that it slides into in there, and of course the board then sits down. Also, as you do that, as you get stuck in there, you've got a tiny this little bracket on the board here that's stopping the board from sitting down, so it's a case of gently getting something in just to tweak that out of the way. Making sure all the connectors are out of the way. You know, you just need your eyes in 1,000,001 different places. Once again, like I say with every guide we do, is if you've got to force it, then there's something wrong. You know, if it's not sitting down properly, then yeah, you've got something that's awry. So just take it out, have a look, try again. If it really isn't happening, then you know, sort of go and have a cup of tea, cup of coffee, take a short break, deep breath. Don't force it, because if you force it and you break it, then you might as well throw it all in the bin. It's trying to find that slot at the top. There we go. So that went into that slot there. It's clear of that bracket and these cables. It's underneath this little bit here, which we need to be, and it's sitting down nicely. And obviously, you know, in what we've done, all these clips have sprung up again. So it's a case of just getting something in there just to push those clips down again, push that speaker in. So there's the board. It doesn't feel springy. If it feels springy, there's normally something behind it, and you need to sort of take it all out and try again. So there's the board home. We're going to put a little screw in that corner now to stop this from all popping up again. Right, there's that screw there. It's got quite a large head on it, and that covers the speaker and the board. Right, there we go. So that's the main board in. We're quite happy that we're seeing all the boards in place underneath all the tags. That's great. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start plugging in all these cables again. You know, if you're just doing the screen, these all sit in perfectly. You know, they pretty much find their own way home. But we've had them out, so it's a bit more fiddly. But still, we know where they go. It's a case of fitting them and making sure they're all home and they're all tight. So bit of pressure on each one, and yeah, perfect. So there's the three little cables there. Next one is the LCD, so we're going to gently bend that over. It's quite stiff cable, and it might need a little bit of a press in that corner along that dotted line, otherwise it could spring back up again. So nice little press there, run your thumbnail just over that gently, just to create that radius. And then the last thing, the digitizer comes on over. Now you can put the camera in before the cables go down or not. I mean, this shows you the other way of how of doing it with the cables in, just to prove you can do the camera without removing the screen connectors on. So you've got the camera, it's got that little leg out onto the side. That will just slide in there underneath the cables gently, and then it sits in that little sort of cavity there. And then again, the connector just finds its own way, gently touch, thinking, okay, yeah, it's found it, and then just a little bit of a press down, and you get that firm connector click. So there's the camera in as well. Once we've got all that in place, we can start thinking about the other parts to the phone, and just finally buttoning it up. Right, we're on the home stretch now. The iPhone 4 is coming together. We're looking at putting all the screws and the last final parts in. Now, next thing we can do, we can put this cover in that covers all these connectors to make sure they stay home. But first things first, we've got that little castellated screw at the top that can go in. So that goes into that corner there. That holds the top left of the board in, and the headphone jack in place, and just holds it all together. And of course that gives us the screw thread for the top bracket to go through. Now the top bracket, obviously, as I was saying before, some people just say it's a bracket to hold it down. Some other people say it's the Wi-Fi connector, and it's the Wi-Fi aerial. I actually think that it is the Wi-Fi aerial, just by the contacts it touches. So as we go on with that, the only thing to worry about is these two pieces here. They clip in there and there. So you want to come in from that way and then push it down. We're happy all the connectors are all in place, so it's a case of pushing it down, then in at the top, and there it sits home. Those two little clips are in there. One long screw in the top middle. Obviously with my guides, they're quite lengthy. I try not to cut so that you see all the ins and outs of it. I don't use a phone that just falls apart in your hands, that it's been apart a million times. This has been apart, but not down to that level. So you see it real time, really. All it takes is patience and being a bit aware of where it all comes apart. You need to get a bit of a tool organizer, nice little work surface, bit of light, and you've got to try and keep the tabs on where all your screws are coming and going, because there's so many different sizes. Let me put this down, it might be a bit easier. So many different screws of different sizes that you really need to sort of keep a tab on where they're all going and where they all go to. What you don't want to be doing is putting sort of too longer screws in too shorter holes, and they end up punching through the board. Obviously you guys haven't got a camera above you in your face, so you can see what you're doing. All I say is, if you're finding like you're getting frustrated with it, you can't do something, it's best to stop, leave it, ship it into us, ship it to a repair site, or give us a call up. We can advise you, rather than break it. You guys have made a great gallant attempt to get it as far as you have. You're part of the minority that will give it a go anyway, and if you don't try, you don't learn anything. And so all else fails, get it into us. But have the confidence, give it a go. We've got all the parts on our sites, you've got all the tools, you've got all the help you need on our phone numbers. Our guys, our engineers would advise you happily, and commend you on being sort of brave enough to want to do it yourself. It's all about learning. Every day's a school day. Right, so the little vibration module, there's me rambling on. Vibration module drops in that top right corner, and like I was saying before, get the two screws in place, sit it down, and make sure it's in the middle of its orientation before you nip it up. The only reason I say that is because if it's tipped to one side, you can get that little rotating head. Sometimes hits against there, and it just won't vibrate. It won't do anything. So we've got the Wi-Fi cable in there, all the different screws, the little vibration module. Next thing down this bottom corner is we're going to put the aerial connector. Now the aerial connector again finds its own way roughly where it is. or where it was, but if you're replacing it, it might not have the bend in the right place. But this one probably requires the most patience. I will make it look easy, but I promise you it's not. Whatever you do, do not force it home, because if you do, it's such a delicate connector that you can peen the edge over on either part, and it just, again, I can't say it a lot, but world of pain. Need a little bit of a kink in that connector, make it a little bit shorter, and sit it on there. And again, I don't want to cut from this because I want to show you real time what it takes, but these connectors can be sometimes a little bit perilous. Yeah, so there you go, it's on. Give me a nice little firm click, and that's your aerial connector. So if that goes wrong, you can't get that on, you'll get no service, which nullifies the fact that, well, you need a phone. So that's in there. Next thing we do, we're going to put this connector on. Now, my advice for this connector is it's got adhesive all the way under here, don't stick it down until you get the connector on. So put the connector on first, find its home, nice little click there, as you heard, and then press from top to bottom down to the cable, and it finds its own way in there. Perfect. It's got a little retention bracket on there to stop it from pinging off if you kick your phone around or anything. This will only go one way, like so. Two different size screws. You've got a tiny beveled screw that sits on the outside. There it is, just there. I mean, again, the engineering that goes into these phones and these frames are just incredible. Put it in loosely. Get the bigger screw, goes on inboard, sits in there, and then just nip them both up. There we go. Nice firm press on there to make sure it's all in. One of the last screws to go in is this one here, and that's in the side of the board. I kept that nice and separate. And as you'll find on your iPhone, that'll have a little white dot above it, little sort of liquid dot that you can replace. In fact, I've got it down there. Red on one side, white on the other, and obviously if it gets wet, it's like litmus paper. The white just turns red, and they know that your iPhone's got a bit damp. You know, it's not necessary, but I'll put that back on there just to show where it goes. There we go, push it down. There you have it. So, we're nearly there now. Last few screws. The SIM dock can obviously be replaced back in there. Simply slides in, clicks in. The battery adhesive strip, well, as we said earlier, it's easy to take that off instead of have it flapping while you're trying to repair it. Just sits it in, and then you just push it down either end there on its adhesive. Last but not least, and this is the one thing that most people get wrong, is this little retaining clip there has to go in before the battery. A lot of people put it in after the battery. It goes in first, and it sits in, and what it is, the little rubber blob sits above the aerial and the aerial plug to hold it down, because if that pings off, you lose service. So that goes in there. Hold that down with your finger, get the battery connector, and then come in with your thumb, locate it, push it down with a nice little click, put the screw in. You can let go now. Put the screw in place. There we go. Down on the battery, and then you can just literally push the battery in. The cable folds and drops down, sort of comes down and comes back up again, takes the slack off, and then the battery sits in there nicely with that tab. Last but not least, obviously we've got a rear casing. It's just worth giving it a rub, and like I said, when you repair these, when you fit your new casings or your new covers, your new screens, always check on the sort of the back and the front for any clear. They'll tend to be a clear patch over there to stop, like a dust-free cover on the back of the lens as well as the front of the lens, and there'll probably be a clear cover that goes over this little graphite strip as well. Okay, peel all that off. As well as obviously on the other side. But yeah, final thing is just to give it a wipe, make sure there's no dust in the camera lens, give it a blowout, and yeah. So the rear cover goes in pretty much where it sets off, with a 2-inch gap, or 2mm gap there. It sits down. You can see it's flush and it's sat into the phone, and then all you do is just push it down. Push it down, put downward force there, and then slide it back, and what you'll see then is that the rear casing's actually slid down towards the phone. Last but not least, obviously the two screws in the bottom, and we can put those in Phillips or Torx depending on what sort of screws you've got. One last thing I'll see as you change the screen, just remember there's a clear, sometimes coloured backing on the back of the screen as well before you put them in. So remember to take that off, because there's not enough space for that clear protector and you end up with a marked screen on the back. But yeah, just be aware. And yeah, so you have it. So once we've rebuilt the iPhone 4, I don't know if give it a bit of a clean. And there we have it. Obviously powered it up, but the battery's, it's got no juice in it, typical. But yeah, so we have a sort of fully disassembled and reassembled iPhone 4. All the buttons work. Yeah, there we go. Remember, thanks for watching my guide. Have a good listen to it. It's too late now, you probably already have. But yeah, take heed. Take all the little bits of knowledge that other people don't tell you that I've dropped in there. And also all the tools, things like the ISSMO tools, all the screwdriver sets, the tweezers, you know, all available on our site. You know, you can't beat these tools, and the ISSMO is just one of the best. So yeah, all the tools, all the parts, all of the knowledge and all the help on our website. So I'm Neil Barker, and thanks for watching this rather lengthy iPhone 4 repair guide.